Hello, Culture Matters Podcast. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to our guest. But before I do that, here's a quote just for this episode. Life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. Soren Kierkegaard. Our guest today, a friend of the Culture Matters Podcast, a steward of values, an exemplar of leadership in their culture, founder, Guardian Roofing and Siding, leader in their faith, example of thoughtfulness on the Culture Matters podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the value of values with Robert Frehafer, what we've learned over the months and weeks that we've been working on unpacking the Guardian values, even going so far as to look at what the opposite of these values would be if we were to live them out, and how we created them, why go through all that effort, and maybe what would be some of the value of you, the listener, doing the same and looking at what you stand for, that's positive and could be negative, constructive and deconstructive. Our guest today is a great person to do this with, who thanks for coming back on the show.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. Thanks for a very nice introduction again. As I get to hear them over and over, I look at it even from a time standpoint. I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's get into this. So I don't want to shortcut that. I appreciate it. It's meaningful, and thank you very much.
Values. What's the first one? The G?
G is so the values are, the way that they're codified right now is that it's GUARDIAN, spelling out the word guardian, the name, the title for the staff members, the values that we embody, but the G, actually the name of that one is guardian, and it's a home improvement specialist that listens intentionally, communicates clearly, and educates the customer by telling the truth. That's the first value.
What over time has come to mind, and the utility of that value or the values in general? Like how can that be practically helpful to the company in your estimation?
So for the sake of time, I will talk practicalities, helpfulness, the value of it, overarching, because we really dug into each one, and I would encourage anybody that's listening to this, and I say this to myself, go back and listen to it, right? Listen to what the value means, how it's impacted, and because this, I don't believe what we're doing now is going to be the abridged version. I think this is going to be an overarching look at values in general, and so for me, I would say that, and we've talked about some of these things already, so it's a little redundant, which I think is positive in my life anyway, redundancy. And the value of the values is that it takes something that is, I guess the word is intrinsic, like you can't see it. Well, you could, it's without being put into language to it, without codifying the values through symbolism, word, deed, action, stories. There's something that you can feel, tell, etc., but it's not clearly defined, and that leaves a lot of room for interpretation. Now, even after the values are coded, even after they're written, which is a hard thing to do, to try to write out. It's hard for me to explain one little question, right? So that's an extremely hard thing for me to do. And I'm thankful for you, Jay, for helping to through when we met years ago to do a done for you process, to spend all the time to shadow me, countless, I'm sure we can count it somehow, but fairly countless hours of getting to know me, shadowing the whole culture together, all these different things to be able to put to word um what is considered a value, right? And so the overarching of that is that now we can have something externally to look at and to be a guide. It can be something to be pointed back to. It can be something that we teach through, we attract with, attract clients, staff, whatever it is that's going on. um
All right, I'll add something to this. There are
yeah,
three
go ahead.
scenarios that I see in
Uh-huh.
companies. Number one, majority of healthy companies, the leadership live the values, but they're not written out, they're not articulated, and it's harder to get to the next level because the followers, they may be bought in to the behaviorism of the leader, but it's hard to scale chaos because there's not written down, it's not articulated, and it's not continuously articulated. So you mentioned redundancy. Redundancy is necessary to build a vision because people need to know where they're going. So majority of healthy cultures, it's the values are lived out more than talked about. It's kind of just like, well, duh, this is the way things are. And it's a bought in leadership, it's an active leadership, it's an engaged leadership. Then you have the cultures where people expect others. So let's say the leadership, the ownership, expect others to live the values when they're not. That's where you see that they're written down. They're everywhere, all around the walls. Maybe they've hired people like myself and organizations to help them codify and clarify the values. But there's a missing piece. That's being done because the expectation is that the people are going to build the pyramid and the pharaoh is not going to pick up a rock. So now we have lots of words and speech and projection on the people. The people are picking up the rocks and building the pyramids. That does not build exponential growth. In fact, it starts to destroy the empire. That's a lot of companies. It may be someone listening to this right now, wondering why the culture isn't what they thought it would be, having read all the books, hired the consultants, invested all this money. The third category is people that live the values and have codified them, clarified them, and communicate them with regularity and actually embody them in their behaviors. And the ownership, the leadership can be held accountable by their people through the values in an open way, in a constructive way. That can lead to exponential growth. And so those are three categories in my observation that I've witnessed. It's those that embody them, like in, let's say, starting at the top of the higher ownership organization, start at the top of the organization. That may be the first generation founder that worked for 40 years in the business, and now they have heirs that have learned so much from them, observing the way that they work, but so much has been left unsaid that the heirs have other qualms, conflicts with that authority figure. because the communication isn't on the level that it would need to be. The people that so the next level would be to become clear, to have those conversations, to go from just modeling behavior to articulating behavior and speech and passing the torch, as they say. And that doesn't have to just be a second generation. It could be that founder with no one, no blood taking over the company, but mentees and subordinates that it's time for them to get to the next level. That's usually how that pans out. The disengaged leader puts lots of effort into codifying and clarifying what it stands for, because the expectation is that's their way out. Right? Other people are going to do the work. Other people are going to act the right way to act. It's all about everybody else, and there's no personal responsibility. It's the accountability of the organization, top down towards their people, and that's where the behaviors aren't modeled by the leadership, but they're spoken and respoken and symbolically represented. That destroys the culture. It's the most ironic thing, because the values are there, they're written out, they're articulated all over the place, but they're not being lived out by the leadership, the people within the positions of authority. I see that the most in the culture world. The third is when it's lived and spoken. The values are a self-awareness exercise that helps the leaders at the top of the organization recognize their faults and their strengths and live the values out in the way where the general people can hold them accountable with the values. And those are the three categories. And the third can create exponential growth, because now we have a higher level of awareness and buy-in in an organization. Things are really moving. The trust is low in the second, where the expectations on the people, and things move more slowly and don't get done. There's too many meetings, not enough action. People don't know what they're doing and how to do it and where to do it. In the first, where the leadership, like the authorities are living the values, things get done. There's it's a lot of there aren't enough meetings, there's not enough vision and strategy, so there's limits to the scale. But in the third, there's a healthy mixture of both, of living the values and articulating the values of work and of thought. And the third one is takes it, I haven't, it takes the right advisory and time and learning, and sometimes years, in my experience, for business owners to go through. And in fact, few do. And many just get completely bought out of their companies and fired and kicked to the curb and regret the whole experience. And there you got the proliferation of private equity. So if you're listening to this podcast and you hate your life as a business owner, don't do anything stupid. Look in the mirror and tell yourself that you love yourself and everything, and you forgive yourself, and reach out to me. Reach out to Robert. It's not the end. If you knew what to do, you'd probably be employed by somebody far more powerful. But you probably had to figure this all out on your own. So that's why you're listening to this podcast. Robert, what do you think about these three categories?
I think so much. I want to be sensitive of time. How much time do we have? Not very much, right?
We have 4 minutes. That's plenty of
Perfect.
time.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what, I think that in regards to the quote that you started off with, if which let me get back to another page. It is life can only be understood backward, but must be lived forward. So without the education, what you're talking about, without the education, somebody that's advising, like a guardian, right? That is the language, right? We know what's going to happen. We've done this thousands of times, so we can give foresight to somebody, a homeowner navigating through a process, a roofing, siding, construction project. But that being said, same thing with a business owner. And and we're a unique, I'm not lumping us all together, but I'm a unique character. And my thoughts on these 3 points align with that quote, because if I knew what I knew 15 years ago, 12 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, if I knew the things I knew now, I would be doing it different. But the second half of that is, but must be lived forward. Like, I understand it, but I had to live through it. Like, the action of living through things is what has my experience, what has taught me, right? Like, even poor experiences, bad, that's my story, right? Like, you talk about healthy companies. I think that there's a level of my story in has attributes in each of those. And when I hear about, because the start, like, I think, there's I now that I'm, now that I have some a level of awareness, there was unhealthy things that were going on as well. But there was a lot of that, unspoken, lived out value that was attractive and motivating and awesome. And I would say the second point in regards to, if the values are written but they're not lived out, it leads to poor culture, a lot of words, a lot of speech, a lot of projection, and the people working, the leaders don't. And I put some pretty bold notes in here in that section, that culture, what I was raised in, or whatever my mind told me, was that you work, you build a business. I did not come from a family of business owners, and I didn't go to school, right? But I guess whatever the culture had, or myself had created, this narrative that you work, you do it, you build a business, and you build that so then you can have time. That was the thing that I told myself while I was pushing so hard, let's say in stage one. And to get there, I was not aware of the things, even the limited amount of things that I'm aware of now. And I experienced that. I experienced, so it's like when I hear the statements like, "Oh, terrible cultures when it's not lived out," that is, I hear it in the mindset like, "Oh, that leader is," like, the judgment of somebody, that leader is horrible, right? Or they're not caring, and they're like, when I think of Pharaoh, I think of this, very hard man that is only selfish and self-centered. I don't look at that as my own story from my perspective. Others may perceive me that way, but I looked at it like, man, I did this. I put the time in. I worked. Let me rephrase that. We put the time in. The people in the company put the time in. We worked together. We created. We did things. God, let's not leave God out of this, has provided all of it, right? Like, he's given every opportunity, everything. So, but I had the experience at that point. So my mindset was like, all right, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to teach. I'm going to get things up and rolling. And then that's how this goes in America. Then you get to go to the gym, ride quads, buy a cool house and enjoy, do great things, go on mission, do all these nice, awesome things. But there was something culturally is weird, right? And that goes on. And there's something weird in humanity, or my humanity, me, my humanness, my own insecurities. It's like, oh, are they working? Oh, are they thinking I'm not working? Oh, am I messing up? I'm noticing signs of things that aren't right. What is going on here? Like, those attributes of what you described the second leadership team as, just coming down on people, not working while they're trying to codify things to tell them what to do and create these processes, whatever it is. Like, so from a humanistic standpoint, I have compassion. I don't know everybody. I don't know everybody's heart. But I do have compassion on those. It is an unknown balanced struggle, right? It goes back to that intrinsic thing that I talk about. Now, when you talk about, so the other part of my note with that is like, all right, we work so much so we can build a business so we can have time and enjoy the fruits of our labor. But it's kind of ironic, or like a conflict, that then once you get there, then it's already starting to unravel in that poor culture. That second phase, it will start to unravel. My hope is held in the third phase that you reference, balance, right? But for me, I'm taking the same person that was the person before a business, the same person that was in through phase one, the same person that was learning through phase two, and as I try to implement and act on phase three, and there's people that have come along with me that have formed some judgments of me, I believe. That might not even sound clear to the listener. My actions, and let me make sure I say this clearly, my poor leadership actions, my communication skills, my management ability, my desires, bit too busy because I'm not delegating well. All these things have impacted the people around me. So there's things to work through in that. And that takes an extra level of patience. And so it makes it even harder to move to this stage three. And I have my own stuff still that I'm carrying with me, like thinking that they're thinking this way and like to just try to throw all that out and just live for the day. Again, going back to the quote, life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forward. I'm still in it, right? Like if I think like, oh, I've arrived, like so now I'm in this mode of like pushing through to where what is it, right? Like there is not just a manual that says this is the exact amount of time you spend today doing this work. This is when you have your meetings, and then when this fire comes up, this is how you look at it and do it. I just watched a video this morning with Jordan Peterson talking about like faith is the action of living something out and being honest as you can in the moment, not knowing what's going to happen, but doing that. I'm not articulating like he did. It was really awesome. But the bottom line is the continual sequence of that creates this meaningful life rather than a lie or an omission, which is creating a false life, which would then be controlling you and oppressing you. So, and then there was another video that popped on, and they were talking about neuroticism or neuroticism. I think that's the word, but people that are neurotic. And one of the traits that was brought up was like everything is like life or death. Every tiny thing that comes up is so important. And I've lived under that for a long time. And because that has been my personality in the past. And still there's a vein of that. I'm not that far removed from it. I have some level of awareness, but still there's like a, a physiological, physiological response to when stuff happens like that. I can feel my heart, my brain starts thinking, I get super focused. I can feel like I have to stay calm or I'll talk real fast and maybe come off, like frustrated with people. So how to navigate some of those things, how to communicate with those around me is very important. So my hope is held in, well, my hope is held in God, but through faith, through that and applying some of the lessons that I've been learning, my my goals and my hope is to have proper communication, a balanced, education between myself and counterparts within the company, a balanced casting the vision of leadership. I actually was writing that out in the second phase. Then you started talking about it in phase three. That's the ideal or concept. And you used the word exponential, and I wrote need to attract leaders, empower leaders, them create a continual growth, because like without some outside influence that will keep those values moving, it's always going to be on the visionary to do that, right? And if they're not engaging, then what happens? I don't know. This is theoretic, like in my mind. I'm not even there exactly, but I'm buying into these concepts that to write the values, to live the values, to have clear training, clear expectations, who's doing what, when they're doing what. why we do the things we do is very important. And then to have faith and trust in the leaders, right? Like, so that's part of a big thing I'm going through right now is that, I've been saying it, I want to delegate and trust, delegate and trust, delegate and trust. Cause that I say it over and over because in the past I have poorly delegated and then didn't trust. Now there's a level of accountability. So how do we navigate that? What's the balance? So I'm going to get into the weeds on all the details of leadership. And when I say that thing about like, oh, there's a manual, well, there is resources. There are people that can help. There's an expense. It's an expense of time. You have to slow down. You have to make the time. You have to slow your brain down. You have expense of power and control. You have to listen and trust other people. There's an expense of money, right? Resources to be able to gather the information, whether it's a book, a video. There's plenty of free stuff out there. Um, and but the benefit of advisory is that you have somebody that's led through it ahead of time. I have someone that's led in many areas that's led through this ahead of time, and they can see me. I just had this discussion last night. Like they can see me and tell me something that I might not even see about myself. If I only read and listen, I'm still using my own tools to process through my own lens, my own worldview, my own experiences, traumas, like positive things that went on. So having somebody from the outside, and it doesn't even have to be, a hugely expensive thing. It can happen through group. It can happen through all different type of mediums. But even when I say that thing like, oh, there's a manual, like that's something that we're working through. This journey from founder to CEO and how it goes and what we do. And I'm very grateful for that. And it's a process. It goes right back to the quote again. It's understood backwards, but lived forward. So here we are. So that's my 4 minutes. I don't know. Can't
If you're
imagine
listening to this
that.
podcast, share this with a friend that you think would benefit from this conversation. Leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast, and we will see you next time. Thanks, Robert.